Hello, I hope everyone had a great Monday. It's a little after 6, so we will go ahead and get started. Uh, and we'll first see if we have any questions. Any questions, anyone? Questions, comments, uh, observations? Okay. Well, if there are no questions, just look at where we were yesterday and see if we can kind of unravel this or bring some light to it. On yesterday, we started off looking at Joshua 24 and what that chapter talks about the history of Israel and how they ended up in the land of Canaan. And so as it goes through the history, we talked about that briefly, and Pastor asked a question about Canaan that quickly prompted us to go to Genesis to kind of do a little research. So on yesterday, I think we ended in Genesis chapter 9, looking at the three sons of Noah and kind of discussing that whole part of the scripture of what happened here with this when Noah gets himself drunk and goes into a sleep, if you will, and his nakedness is uncovered by his son. So, and then we see that Ham was Canaan was cursed rather than Ham, who was Canaan's, which is Ham's son, and that's where we are.
Genesis what 9 and what run?
Yeah, 9. I would suppose we'd start at verse 18, and I guess one of the things that I thought was interesting in this was Canaan was not even Ham's first son. So this is kind of interesting. But any questions or comments or observations on this?
Good morning, everyone. Forgive me. Good evening. Ron, a long time ago, you talked about Noah and being drunk. And you gave the analogy of that he may have not been drunk off any kind of TJ Swan or cold duck. He could have been discombobulated with his thoughts. And could you just speak upon that a little bit more? Does it mean he was, growing up, I always heard so Noah was a drunk. Do you gather that, that drunkenness may have been in trying to stay in compliance with what the Creator wanted him to do? Because out of all the characters in the Bible, Noah was the most skillful one. He taught you how to grow a garden. Could you just speak upon that if you don't mind?
Well, I don't. I do. I think I've talked on this several times, and I don't remember the details of it. I kind of see this a little bit more, a little differently each time I look at it, and it's one of those things that's I guess just kind of never been completely clear to me. I do remember saying I saw this as a type of sleep, a type of not drunk in the sense that we think of being drunk, but just being in a stupor, not understanding what's going on, and not being in a place where he's in full awareness. But I don't know for anymore what this says, George. I don't remember saying that, but it doesn't. Uh, I'm not saying I didn't, but no, I don't. I don't understand the story. Is what I'm telling you. So, uh, and if anybody else understands it or sees it a little bit clearer than I do, please feel free. Okay. One of the things that Pastor asked on yesterday was talk about the sons of Canaan, to see if that shed any light on anything, and so maybe it's something that he could see in that. But from the looks of things, Canaan had two sons, Sidon, Sidon. It was his firstborn, and then Heath, Heth. And Sidon's name just talks about a hunter, one who hunts or fishes. And it comes from a root that talks about to gather meat by working for it. Heath is talking about an enclosure, and it also talks about something that we fear, something that we dread. So I don't see how, or I don't see any anything, any light that sheds on us to give us any indication what it means to enter the land of Canaan, or what does that, where does that take us in chapter 24? So has anybody else looked at this or anything that you see?
Hey, Ron, this is Barbara.
Hey,
Good
Barbara.
evening, everyone. I'm still not there either yet, but I started looking at this by looking at trying to track down the meaning of some of the key words in this Genesis 9:20 through 27.
Mm-hmm.
And I also started by looking at Shem, Ham, and Japheth and what their names meant. So if I look at Shem, Shem's name is name, and it usually represents, the traits or the deeds of an individual. And sometimes, a Joshua would be named Joshua because it represented the traits of Joshua, who sat under Moses' tutelage and was fearless because he trusted God. So Shem's name was the same thing. Japheth's name meant God shall enlarge. And that had to do with what he spoke over Japheth as he was talking about, as Noah was talking about blessings and the curse of Canaan. And then Ham's name, I think we got into a little bit. And I think Sheldon got into that about the price of two separate names. So I won't go into Ham right now because I didn't do him very well. However, I also looked up the name of Canaan because these were the principles basically involved in verse 9. I'm sorry, verse 28 through 27. And Canaan comes from the Hebrew word kana, Kana. And I just thought it just blew my mind when I looked at that. It's land of purple, but it also means to be brought into synchronicity.
Huh.
And to synchronize means to give up, your individual learnings in order to unite more effectively as a group. So I just thought that was really interesting. I did look up words like uncovered, drunk, saw, those kinds of words. Drunk meant intoxicated. Of course, now you can be intoxicated by the spirit, but this implies intoxicated to satiate with a stimulating drink, or figuratively to influence or be full with drink.
Okay.
Wine, I looked up, was from the word G-A-Y-A-N, and that's from an unused root, which means to effervesce. That means, by implication, the bubbles in the drink.
Yeah.
Intoxication, to give off bubbles or gas. Fermenting liqueurs show enthusiasm, excitement, liveliness. And I know this is not saying a lot, but I'm trying to put pieces out there.
No, yeah.
Hopefully, all of us together can take pieces of the puzzle. And then the question I asked is there a difference between saw nakedness and uncover nakedness? Because as I'm sure some of you who researched a little bit saw in Leviticus, there was a lot of uncovering of nakedness in a sense, which implied a sexual sexual action, engaging in sex. But the saw nakedness doesn't imply that. It implies looking at an unclothed body. So it says that Noah was uncovered in his tent. Ham saw his father's nakedness and told his brothers. That's the essence of what that said. So there are several commentators who would say, okay, he had an incestuous relationship with Noah, or he raped him, and that doesn't say any of that. It simply says he was uncovered in his nakedness, and it implied in that was because he had imbibed the wine, had drunk the wine, and that Ham walked in and saw him.
And see that there are two sides to that, Barbara. My first thought was, and this may be what George was talking about earlier, my first thought was that what he saw, was it the vulnerability of his father because he was drunk? He was not the father protector, the godly man that I know. Here he is drunk, and I see, is that the nakedness that he saw? Or, going back to Leviticus, did he see the nakedness? Because it says the nakedness of your father is it talked about the father's wife. So, and I agree with it. It doesn't say anything here about a sexual encounter, but did he see his mother or his father's wife uncovered? There's so many things here that
I didn't see that, Ron, because it said that the other two brothers, backed into the room and covered Noah. So the implication is, if he'd seen the wife, that would have been a whole nother, I guess, take on this. But I'm wondering if part of it was that, not that Ham walked in and saw his father and did see what is nakedness. Nakedness exposes. It exposes
Yeah.
the nudity, and I wonder if indeed he saw some vulnerability in his father, who was a man of who was a righteous man, as you said when you first came on, and I'm wondering if part of it was he did not go out and belittle him to his brothers or say something, there's our great father in there and look at him now, or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. This is
disrespected him in some way.
Yes. I agree.
And I encourage you all to do the research on this. In that era, there was a certain protocol you had to go by when you entered a man's tent. And some of it was based upon what your statue was. If you were a shepherd, there was a certain way that you had to enter a person's tent. I forgot what the information is, but yet it's in my phone somewhere. In that era, how you entered a person's tent, and maybe Noah's son did not follow the protocol to enter the tent. And, even to the day, in a practical sense, you don't stop by no one house unannounced. You give people a heads up. You check in. Yet in that era, you had to follow a certain regiment to enter a person's tent. And tent, whenever you see it in the Bible, it does mean some degree of separation from someone. Moses pitched his tent outside of the village. For those that want to get down with him, this is where I am. But that's it right there.
George has a point in that part of the culture back then was, you did not parade yourself, or you did not allow, if you were someone of stature, as Noah was in his community and in his family, you were careful not to be seen. Nakedness was not something that was widely seen, apart from being in your own surroundings, in your own tent, in your own enclosure, in your own home, kind of thing, with your wife or whomever. So it wasn't something that was seen and broadcast generally. And when Ham left, he didn't cover his dad. The thing somebody might do is, well, it doesn't say why Ham went in there either. That's the other thing. He didn't cover his dad. That would have been a bit more respectful of him. Although Noah was in his own tent. I mean, it was his domicile, his house, his room. And as George said, ordinarily somebody wouldn't just walk into your place. However, Ham did not cover him. Went out, told his brothers, and his brothers, in a respectful manner, walked in and covered him. So, I mean, there are lots of nuances even in that.
So
go ahead.
I'm sorry, this is from Al. So, Ms. Barbara, then the disrespect, just if we're just looking at what we can see and not adding on to it in a sense. The disrespect was in Ham not respecting his father's moment of nakedness, being unaware that he was vulnerable to his son. It was in his disrespect to his father, right? His other brothers were respectful in going and covering him up, but he was very disrespectful in going and not bragging, but announcing to his brothers that his father was a naked.
I see that as part of the disrespect, yeah, of going and then telling what you saw within the confines of your father's tent. And the father was in a very vulnerable position, being exposed in a vulnerable position at that point in time. Again, whether it was intoxicated and being in the spirit or intoxicated with the spirit, I mean, it's funny that they both, in a sense, mean the similar kind of thing, but one is physical and one is spiritual. But part of what, yeah. Okay.
One thing. Now, I thought that he had
Okay, so I need to go
built
now.
a tent for his wife, or was he in the tent, drunk and naked? Where was his wife? She had to be in the same bedroom he was in.
Bye.
She had to be somewhere around there when all that was going on. And I know she wasn't drunk.
Could you guys check your phones, please, and mute them if you're not speaking? Charles, for us to talk about his wife would be pure speculation, because again, there was nothing about that here. So, and with Moses telling the story the way it's being told, I don't want to speculate unless somebody else has some thoughts.
I have a question. This is Evelyn. Do you think that something was left out of this story or this concept? Or it's meant for us to try to find the nugget in what's happening?
Every story is about us. Every single story that's told is about us, and to tell all the nuances of the story, Evelyn, as you just said, would be to have a book that's thicker than thick. So yeah, part of it is for us to, as best we can spiritually, discern the treasures, the nuggets within that story, and the nuggets relate to what does this tell me about me, or tell me about the way that I should live, kind of thing. So,
well, I want the answers to that.
I want the answer to the Noah thing as well. I mean, it's very intriguing.
It is, but yeah, it's just a thought. But thank you, Ms. Barbara.
Okay.
I agree with what Barbara just said. I think all of this, the whole book is written as a mystery, and as we uncover those mysteries, we uncover ourselves. We see more and more of ourselves, and actually, that's one of the things that sort of intrigues me about doing these type studies. But this one has always been one that just seemed to be a little different to me.
But if we look at Noah's response, somehow he finds out what happened. One way or the other. He was covered. But, it's hard for me to believe that the other two sons told him what was said. I mean, because they're trying to be discreet and to keep things confined within his tent. So I'm wondering if word got out through him to I don't know to others. Noah found out.
I think he found out because of the garment. They took a different garment in than the one that he was covered with. It said they put it on their shoulders, so they entered the room with a separate garment. He knew, I would think, by that I'm not. I have a different covering. This is a covering, that was provided by my sons. Why is that?
Gotcha.
I do want to clear something up Pastor and I were talking yesterday about thing I mentioned earlier, Barbara, that because Deuteronomy says a man should not take his father's wife so that he should not uncover his father's skirt. And in one instance, it says his father's nakedness. And that's what I took to mean. There may have been something else there that's a mystery that we're not seeing. But when you look in the Torah or the Chumash as to what that says, it says it a little differently. It says, no man shall marry his father's former wife. If so, he removes his father's garments. So that gives it a totally different meaning. At least I think it does. But in some biblical circles, by having intercourse with her, that is a form of marriage. So,
yeah,
instead
that's
of a yeah.
Deuteronomy 12.
But
You remember when the patriarchs were giving blessings to their sons and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I'm wondering if Noah, once he's woken up, however, did not surmise spiritually something about Canaan, because it doesn't resonate. It doesn't make sense about why he would skip Ham, who was the one who observed him, and talk about Ham's fourth son, his youngest son. But when you remember yeah, go ahead.
Well, I can't remember if you said this yesterday or Audrey, but if this did involve his wife, or could Canaan be the offspring of that encounter?
However, this didn't happen. Noah woke up or whatever. He came to his senses. I'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And when he knew that this had happened, then if it had happened with his wife, Canaan wouldn't have even been born then yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it kind of reads as though it happened rapidly, right behind each other. And that's how we've come to understand it. But the curse may have come later. The curse may not have come right after he awoken out of his awoken. Is that a word? Awoken. After he came out of his stupor. Again, I'm kind of brainstorming here. I don't know, and I don't mind saying that, I guess. And see, Barbara, what do you get out of verse 18? Why does it, before it goes into the story, why does it say, now the sons of Noah who came out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Ham was the father of Canaan? Why does it tell you that? before it
Because
goes
it's setting you
into.
up. It's really setting you up to tell you about Canaan. You know what I'm saying? As Evelyn asked the question about the nugget, what's the nugget? What is the thread that's resonating in all of this, regardless of what happened or what didn't happen? What is the thread that's resonating? And part of it is that it's telling you about Canaan. So if we talk about Canaan, Canaan was the land that was promised to the Israelites. But it was a land where there were lots of different gods, that there was lots of sexual immorality, that lots of immoral kinds of things were going on. And so I wonder if Noah foresaw something in the line of Canaan. I don't know.
Well, I was intrigued when you talked about synchronicity in part of the name. That's interesting to me. So when you talk about all those different cultures, because that's what you're saying, all these different tribes and cultures here, and you know the different types of immoral things being done, different types of religions even. So the synchronicity is the oneness that is going to be brought forth by this curse, by this the whole thing, by them occupying this land and changing the consciousness of the land, because that's what they do.
Well, one of the things you said, Ron, was, you remember you said something about a curse, which was really not a curse? Something you said earlier on a number of weeks ago.
Yeah, a curse is not really a curse. It is something that can be changed when you reach a point of maturity. It can be pulled back from you. It is something that is hidden or something that is covered up. So it can be bad, it can be good. If you reach a place of maturity, you reach a point of understanding, then it becomes something that it's sort of like a reward. It becomes a point of enlightenment for you. But it is only bad and it's only a curse if you continue in your evilness and never try to be restored.
Well, one of the other things we know about Canaan is that there was some intermarriage. They were told to destroy all of the Canaanites, but all of them were not destroyed.
Yeah.
And there was some intermarriage with Canaanites, with some of the Israelites. Canaan was at the intersection of, I think, 3 different continents or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Let me see what they said. It's like it was a crossroads, if you will, where it was physically located. It adjoined 3 different countries.
Well, that's where the purpleness came from, because it was a merchant city, known for its trades and for its fabrics. So it was known for its fine fabrics, and that's where part of the name comes from, a merchant, because he bared a heavy load. It was one of the largest trade ports in the area.
So if it's the bridge between 3 continents, it was the city of commerce. So lots of stuff happened.
Yes.
Lots of visitors and lots of people went through this crossroads, if you will, from different countries even. I think Africa, and who's on the other side, the Mediterranean and Philistines, lots of activity. And so if you relate that to synchronicity, it's almost like we were saying, nothing is bad in and of itself. That it relates to its rightness. And it could be that Noah foretold Canaan's unrightness, but because of how things unwound themselves, the very name of Canaan, oh, what was that? The very name of Canaan means Hana, or in addition to the land of purple, meaning to be brought into synchronicity. And so Canaan, being that bridge between those three different countries, could have been used to as you say, for those cultures to start blending and being brought into synchronicity in a sense. But you know, and I'm just talking, but it
Yeah.
there's something to it, but we just need to study it more. I need to study it more.
Well, the other part of it is, and this is where we were looking at chapter 23 of where were we yesterday? 23 or whatever. Was that Joshua? I can't remember. The thing that we boil down to, this day you decide who you're gonna worship. But as for me and my house, in other words, that synchronicity, I don't think has been realized yet. And maybe that's why this is so mysterious to us, is because it is being formed right now. That oneness, because we are the people who are trying to bring different cultures together, trying to show people what true enlightenment is. And maybe we are that synchronicity that is trying to happen. So it almost like when we were studying the 12 tribes of Israel, the conclusion was there were never a nation. They never became a nation because they stayed divided. You had 10 tribes, then you had 2 tribes. So when does that come together and become one nation? It's being created now. So that synchronicity part of it is very interesting to me, because what you have described in that those 3 continents, or that is that any and every type of culture and religion and any type of sexual immorality, everything was done there. Anything that could be entertaining or could make money was being done there. And I'm not sure globally if we're any different right now. So, and part of that name also is a heavy burden, and this is what that describes as well, is bearing a heavy burden and trying to unravel this and bring understanding to it.
And what you just described, me or us.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Hold on a minute.
Yeah, somebody else is.
I have my earbuds in, but what Ron has just described was me. All these things are things that I deal with, or have dealt with. And it's waiting for me, and this is what I get from that. It's waiting for me it's waiting for me to get things right. I don't know what else to say, but when he said that, I could just see me in all those things that he just mentioned. Those things are in me. Does that make sense? Because I do believe we are these concepts that we're studying, right?
We are most definitely these concepts, and as I said, yesterday's lesson kind of what was started by what you said Saturday. In spite of what I'm going through or what I see in there, and I'm paraphrasing you didn't say it like this. This is what decision I have chosen. This is who I have chosen to be, and I think you're exactly right. All of these things or voices, and it may not be in all of us, of course not. The because we're talking about every kind of evilness that man can do, I think is being represented in Canaan. So, but just like when you read the scriptures, you read them with the understanding that these are personas, not necessarily looking at these as people or some history book, but these are personas of who the human can be, and every one of them is in me. So there is something in me that represents all of this. If not, I would not be able to touch it, and there would be nothing that I feel for others when I see this. So this level of consciousness it is a part of me as well. So yeah, you're absolutely right, and I hope I'm saying that right, or is it making sense? But that's the whole point of it, I think, is for us to bring balance to ourselves, bring balance to those things in us that will help and allow us to be unity together and balance the rest of the universe.
And what you're saying makes a lot of sense, because we are uncovering truth, and truth is who we are. So yeah, there's some things that are unripened in us and some things that are, and we're working on those that are not ripened. So yeah, what you're saying makes sense. We're going to find this out. We digging, we getting it. I'm done.
Okay, thank you. But I guess I don't want to say apologize, because there are times we do stumble on trying to understand things, but I have to admit these scriptures are a mystery to me, and always have been. And I've tried to look at them a couple of times and kind of grab a thread and open it up, see if I can unravel it. But this is a little different to me than most of the scriptures we look at.
But another way to look at it, I'm just trying to, look at it from different perspectives. Noah, let's just say he drank more than he should have. Let's just say that. Let's follow this rabbit then. If he did, he could have passed out in his tent, and then pushed the covers off and uncovered himself, whatever. So what Shem and Japheth did was they covered his shame, in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
What Ham did was expose his shame, in a sense. Now let's not look at Noah the man, but Noah the concept. And then as we were talking about us, are there some things in us that need to be exposed but that are covered?
Ooh.
Versus things in us that are uncovered and exposed. But are there things in us mostly that remain covered that need to be exposed?
It needs to be exposed, yeah. The answer is yes. Short answer. And I think that is part of what we're doing now, or attempting to do. I was looking for this because you when you said that, it kind of, there's a part in here. Let me see here. Verse chapter 7, it says, "Then the Lord said to Noah, enter the ark, you and all your household, for you alone I have seen to be righteous before me in this time. So he's talking to Noah. And what he's saying to him in all of the earth in this time, in verse 9 of chapter 6, it says, these are the record generation of Noah, who Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his time. In his time, Noah walked with God. So that's a part of chapter 6. So I had seen that, and it made me, Barbara, kind of see Noah as not being able to do anything wrong. But your point is well taken.
Yeah, when you contextualize and when you put him in the context of everything else that was going on around him, the people, the culture, etc., for his time, he was a righteous man.
He was a righteous man.
The question is, for this time, knowing what we know about who we are, would that same thing be true?
Yes, that's the question.
And the question is not just for the Noah, but for the trait that he exemplifies in us. Is there anything that needs to be exposed that we still have covered? Is there anything that still separates us from knowing truly who we are and the power that we have? And I don't mean power negatively, but I mean the essence of the Creator that we are. What's there between us and actually having that exposed in us, having that be seen in us, if you will? So, just rhetorical.
Well, it's my belief that in things that I am righteous in, I don't know how righteous it is until I meet a situation where it challenges my righteousness. So the righteousness that we all possess is good when everyone can agree on a certain topic. How do you deal with when someone does not agree with your righteousness? You have some people out here, they're very knowledgeable of the Bible, yet in their righteousness of what they view as righteousness, they're going to beat you across the head with it. That's not righteousness. Me, it's not. So the things that trip me up out here are the things that I view as righteous, that I'm willing to go to hell or heaven to stay with. And when I meet a situation that challenges my righteousness, that's what's going to make your righteousness righteousness. That's opinionated. How you deal with adversity that goes against what you view as righteous. When I was growing up,
something to that, George. Can I say something? Because you just said something there, and it kind of connects with what Barbara was saying and what we read earlier. He was righteous. Noah was righteous at that time. If you go back and look at that, what it says and what you just described is righteousness is a journey, and what you were righteous with yesterday may not lead you to righteousness tomorrow. So you are constantly challenged to be more spiritual, if for lack of a better term, or to come in a deeper or higher point of awareness than you were before. So you just because if the Noah in you is righteous on this Monday afternoon, by Friday that will be challenged to take you to another place. So I agree with what you're saying. I just heard that when you said it. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And in righteousness, sometimes we're not going to understand righteousness until we're put in that position. When I was growing up, there were the phone booths. If I was going to be late, I had to call my mother and father. And in times that I didn't call my mother and father, there were some consequences. And I'm like, what y'all tripping on? Then when I become a parent and the technology is really improved, I purchased this Apple phone for a year. I'm paying the monthly bill. You can't call me and tell me when you going to be late. Well, Daddy, I was just 5 minutes late. Man, 5 minutes is a lot of time. So in righteousness, sometimes we're not going to understand it in a youthful mind. And a youthful mind doesn't mean that we're 11 or 12 years old. A youthful mind can mean you 55, yet in that a certain situation, I may think like an 11-year-old. So the whole aspect of righteousness is you can never put a ceiling on it. One of the things I like about my occupation is every day I learn something new, either about trucking or something by way of trucking. So the righteousness that I believe in, that I think is top shelf, I really don't know how righteous it is until someone has a different perspective of it. That's it right there.
Thank you, George. I agree with that. Righteousness has no ceiling. There is no limitation on that.
So this righteous man then was told that he and his 3 boys and their wives and his wife, 8 of them altogether, including Noah, would be the ones who would be taken into the ark, as well as with the specified animals, and everything else would be destroyed. So in Noah, then, in this attitude of Noah, comes all of the rest of humankind through Noah and his sons and daughters. Noah, his wife, and their sons and daughters. It doesn't say he had any other sons, but through Noah's sons and daughters, the earth was replenished.
Yes.
So then Noah then represented mankind from that point on. The vineyard represented something. I don't know if it's the culture around them or whatever. Each one of the sons, Shem was the line through which the Messiah came. Japheth, they each populated a different portion of the earth. So it's so much bigger than just what Ham supposedly did to Noah by disrespecting him or whatever. In the root of this story is still, again, the root of the story of us worldwide.
Yes. Yes.
Ron?
Yes, ma'am.
And in conclusion, this whole aspect of righteousness, to me, it's very hard to arbitrate situation when both parties are righteous. And as an example, my cousin does not want his son to play football because of CTE and concussions. However, his wife, which is my cousin, she wants the son to play football. All her brothers played football, and they're doing quite well. And that's a hard case to arbitrate. And the easy answer is, well, what does the son want? Yet both parties are bringing valid points. You play football, you work in a collective arena where you operate as a team. The father is not in favor of football because of CTE. So just the whole aspect of, it's easy to arbitrate something where one person is righteous and the other person just don't make no sense in what. Those are easy. Yet when both parties are righteous, whoever has to arbitrate that, those, to me, those are the difficult ones. Those are the ones, I got to dig my heels in and look at this as in an objective point of view. So just that whole aspect of when you have to arbitrate a situation, when both parties are righteous, man, to me, that's a pretty difficult one. And in a comparative degree where one person just don't make no sense and the other person has a solid way of living. You follow what I'm saying, Ron, and the rest of y'all? Like, you disagree, agree, or what?
Yeah, I follow what you're saying. Yeah, and you're right that can be very quite difficult to because both of them are makes valid points as you pointed out. So in this case, I was thinking that Noah through the line of Seth, which was Adam's youngest son, as we studied the other day, came Noah, and Seth became both Cain and Abel, and that is a balance. That is a balance, and the characteristics of both rather, and in that balance comes Noah, and yet God calls him righteous. So I think sometimes we may not have a grasp of what it means to be righteous, because it certainly does not look as though all of your actions are always in line of being upright or doing what is right. But even with that said, I'm not understanding this story fully. It may, of course, not be saying what I think it's saying as far as him. It does seem like, to me, though, he loses his awareness of self, and that that alone is just looks at him differently. But all I'm trying to say is righteousness may mean a whole lot more than what we think it means. If that makes sense.
Ron, This is Evelyn
Yes, ma'am.
again. I'm listening to what you guys are saying. Can't we get intoxicated with our thoughts and it overtakes?
Yeah, see, that's what I originally thought when I read this years ago. Because I remember studying this when we were at Great New Faith one time, and that's what I thought. I did not see it as a physical drunkenness. I had too much to drink physically. I saw it as kind of a metaphor to mean something else. But I admit now, every time I look at it now, I question what is it really saying. But yeah, you're absolutely right.
Okay.
Ron, this is Angela. I wanted to, hey, I was wanting to, what I was going to say was what it reminds me of, and I may not be right, is just say if I saw a person at their weakest moment and, they was just being wild and I saw it, and I was making fun of it, but I went and pulled somebody else in and said, look, exposing this person. See, they ain't what they said they was, what they appeared to be. Look, and you exposing that person. So that's the way I see it. Like I said, I might not be right, but that's the way that that it could be. I don't know, but that's just what I wanted to say.
I like that, Angela. I like that, and even if this is talking about a physical type thing, a literal, which we talked about, I still like your analogy as well. I think that makes perfectly good sense, and I don't think anybody would disagree with that. Yeah. We were just trying to decide, was there something more? Just something, as we said before, there's a nugget here that still seems to elude me anyway. And I think the nugget has a lot to do with Canaan, because his name is mentioned throughout this text a lot. So in trying to grasp and understand that, but I like your assessment of what you see here.
Who is that?
Ron.
Hey, Pastor. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, this is Audrey. I've been trying to ask a question for a long time, and I got some technical issues going on. Anyway, I wanted to ask if y'all talked about what wine means and what the vineyard means, because when I looked at that, sorry.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I interrupted you. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think we talked about wine a few sessions ago, about how wine can be thoughts, and it's the innermost thoughts. And because wine has the number 7, it means completeness, or complete reflection. And because wine is kind of like wine has the number 70. So it's like a very strong 7. And also vineyard means sort of the work you do to make a spiritual connection with the Creator. So when it's talking about Noah planting a vineyard and then partaking of the wine, spiritually, it would have been kind of like meditation, wouldn't you think? Because he's making a connection with the Creator, the vineyard, that's the vineyard, and the wine are thoughts, and those really deep thoughts. So maybe Ham interrupted that kind of process. And I agree that because of his spiritual process, he had some knowledge of Canaan, even though Canaan wasn't born yet. It was just through his own spiritual process that he was able to access that sort of wisdom. But anyway, so my question is, and I got on a little bit late, but did y'all talk about the meaning of the vineyard and the wine?
Well, yes, ma'am. We did go into it, but we did not see it from that perspective, and I like that. Yeah, that and as you were talking, I'm trying to see it and plug the rest of the story in. So he had not seen. So you're saying Canaan had not been born yet. So this is his insight. He's seeing here that Canaan would be what? Canaan would bear the burden of synchronizing what?
Yeah, he just saw it as part of whatever spiritual wisdom he acquired through his connection.
Okay. So Ham entering this tent without being invited, is that a thought? Is that's not literal then, right? Or is that him? Help me with that, because I like your line of thinking there. Ham,
I mean, it could have been literal, and he just interrupted his connection, or he interrupted his train of thought, or anyway, I'm not sure. I'm still thinking about all that.
So the vulnerable position that he saw his father in is not what we think then. That vulnerability is he saw him at a time of uncertainty, or he saw him in a dreamlike state. He saw him in an unconscious way and took it to mean something else.
I think it had to be some sort of vulnerability, yes.
Wine can also symbolize inward refreshment. As you said, the meditation is a way of inward refreshment, blessing and wisdom. But with wine, we can also become drunk and behave in an irresponsible drunken stupor. So there has, we've been talking about movement and rest. Everything has its opportunity to be out of balance, if you will.
Yeah.
So
yes, everything can be positive, and it can be negative depending on your state of balance.
So I think I just happened upon, what's his name, Canaan. Divine judgment is not a judgment, if you will. Not a judgment of punishment, but divine judgment is judgment of nourishment. Now, that doesn't seem to make any sense. But if the divine judgment is enough to get our attention so that we change where our path, then it could be the very thing that gives us life, that nourishes us in a sense. So Canaan, the judgment of you shall be a servant to your brothers, that can be a judgment of sorts. for the very name of Canaan relates to synchronicity, being brought into synchronicity. So that divine judgment of punishment, seeming punishment of serving brothers, can be the divine nourishment of serving his brethren, to show them who they are.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
essence of who they are.
I'm sorry that I got on late. However, I'm trying to catch up where you are and listening to what you're saying. I have a question. Have you gotten an understanding of the uncovering yet?
You said
possibly. Yeah, we're trying. I'm not sure if we have. We're just kind of stumbling through this and putting pieces together. I'm not sure. I think someone said the uncovering may have been his vulnerability, or
we said there was a difference between someone who saw his nakedness as opposed to uncovering his nakedness, because when Ham saw him, he was already uncovered, but Ham saw his father's nakedness, so he looked, which implies something different than a sexual type act.
Okay. Is that him? He's seeing the father's nakedness. Is that the original text? Is that how Brenner translated it?
Yeah.
Yes, I did not.
Hello?
No, I don't think Benner did it that way.
I'm trying to understand where the seeing that's supposed to be uncovering come from, because
okay. I was looking at the Torah and the commentary, which also talks about the 5 books and then the underlying commentary related to those 5 books, and that's when I asked the question about, is uncovering, is seeing nakedness different from uncovering somebody's nakedness?
The reason I asked that is because the seeing of the nakedness is could be either way. He saw his daddy's nakedness or the mother's. However, if he uncovered the nakedness, that speaks to the idea of intimacy with the mom. If he uncovered his father's nakedness, that speaks to the idea of having an intimate relationship as opposed to just seeing the nakedness.
But this doesn't say he uncovered their nakedness. It says that he was uncovered in his tent, and then Ham saw his father's nakedness.
Okay. So if he was uncovered in his tent and Ham saw his nakedness, then if the uncovering of the nakedness speaks to the idea of intimacy, then Ham would have seen him and engaged in intimacy.
If you look at it carefully, in the previous verse before it gets to that, Ham enters the room, it says, and he drank of the wine and became drunk and uncovered himself. So Ham perceived the nakedness that no. So is that even talking about a physical or real nakedness as we know it?
And also, can this be related to how David danced naked before God? Is that a similar kind of thing? In terms of Noah uncovering himself.
I think what's throwing us is that with David dancing naked, that was in jubilation. What's throwing us is the idea that Noah was drunk. So in his drunkenness, it appears on the surface, if not in reality, that he uncovered himself. So he took his clothes off because he was drunk. If that's how it has previously been translated. However,
but are we talking physically? Because spiritually, the vineyard means connection to the Creator, and wine means deep thoughts or deep inner reflection.
I think that, Audrey, the nakedness in this case has a greater connection to the nakedness in the garden than it would with David. Who told you were naked?
Okay.
It does. It does, because in 2 Samuel, as you said, David was dancing for joy. They were bringing the Ark of the Covenant back, and his wife Michelle said, you're dancing shame. She tried to overlay on him the fact that she thought that he was dancing shamelessly, as uncovering himself, as if he were uncovering himself in the eyes of the maidens. So she tried to put a negative kind of thought about what he was doing to something that was genuinely spiritual. Now that's different from what
isn't Ham doing the same thing, though?
Well, is Noah doing the same thing? That's the issue.
No.
From that Ham.
The difference between before we get to understanding the idea of what the spiritual nature of this nakedness is speaking to, should we not understand first what does it mean for him to have gotten drunk? It says that he planted the vineyard. Okay, we established that. But then he became drunken. What does that mean? If he became drunken, was he drunk spiritually, or was he drunk from the wine literally? If he was drunk spiritually, then the uncovering speaks to the nakedness of Genesis. For the nakedness of Genesis speaks to, when in Genesis, the Creator says, who told you you were naked? So this is a realization in Genesis that you are spiritually unclothed or you're physically unclothed. Either way, it speaks to a type of exposure that is shameful. So the question becomes, is this shamefulness with Noah the same type of shamefulness that was with Adam? And if it is, then what does the drunkenness mean? What does it mean to be drunken? Has anyone looked at that to see what that actually is speaking to, not from imbibing wine, but from what does drunkenness mean spiritually? What is the root of that word to be drunk? That kind of thing. And I think if we can see that, then we have more of an insight into the results of that drunkenness. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the root of that word drunk is 7937, which is shakar, shakar, means intoxicated, tipsy, to satiate with a stimulating drink, or figuratively to influence, be filled with drink. So that's basically what that says about what it means.
Now, what was the other one? To influence? What was that? You said figuratively to influence.
Figuratively influence, be filled with drink. That's all it says. Influence, be filled with drink.
So if this idea of the wine speaks to what is it, spiritual life, because the wine represents blood, does it not? And even when Jesus drank the wine, it was symbolic of the blood. The life of the man is in the blood. So if he was in this state, then can it not be saying, or does it say that Noah is in a spiritual state, a type of kind of tonic spiritual state? And if that is the case, then what his son saw was his vulnerability, and his vulnerability that he saw was that he was in such a spiritual state. He was subject to anything from the outside, meaning that he did not even recognize his son's presence there. So, if that is the case, then the other two boys, what did they do? Rather than see him in that state and mock the state that he was in, they sought to protect his vulnerability as opposed to mocking his vulnerability. Now,
I think that's what we deduced earlier. That was the difference in the two.
Yeah.
That Ham was he disrespected his father. He went and told his brothers what he saw, which means mocking what he saw, rather than being protective of him and covering him. He left him exposed and went and told his brothers.
If we go back to Genesis and look at the nakedness there and the clothing there, in regards to the nakedness, I do feel very strongly that it will give us the understanding of what this is saying in regards to the marking versus the protection. Because what they actually did, they clothed his nakedness. When it talks about they took something and walked backwards to cover him, it speaks to the idea of the nakedness being clothed, as was the nakedness there in Genesis. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you're thinking that nakedness is the same Strong's number in Genesis where we're talking about Adam.
Yes.
That's 6172. Okay.
So anyway, I don't think that we quite see that yet in terms of the drunkenness. Because what happened with Adam was you ate from the tree. What happened with this was you drink the wine, and both of them resulted in what? Nakedness. Does that make sense?
Sorry, both resulted in what?
In both cases, what they did resulted in nakedness. One was in beer and the wine. The other one was eating from the tree. Both of them spoke to the ingestion of something or taking something in that resulted in them being naked.
Pastor, I have a question then. Is that what religion does?
I'm listening.
It leaves you vulnerable, and I don't know what else to say.
The vulnerability, religion does leave you vulnerable and naked, yes. You're unclothed. You're spiritually unclothed. And when you realize that, what happened? You began to make every attempt to clothe yourself in righteousness. Why? Because you have been totally unclothed by virtue of making every effort to adhere to all of the policies and principles of religion that are antithetical to the scriptures. So that's your vulnerability. That's why you can't sleep at night. You feel like you sinned. That's why you feel uncomfortable if someone says that, well, you didn't pay enough money in church. Those are the vulnerabilities and type of nakedness that you're experiencing. However, when you begin to see the truth of what's in the scriptures, that doesn't bother you anymore. As a matter of fact, what Jesus said becomes a reality. When you know the truth, it will indeed set you free. Free from what? Free from all those things that have had you entangled in those religious settings. So, if we look at that in regards to what happened here with Noah, are we beginning to see rather that Noah came to rest, and when Noah came to rest, it says that he planted a vineyard. The question is the planting of the vineyard or a material thing, or is it a spiritual thing? No different than, and the light was called from the darkness. And he said there will be light, and there was light, that kind of thing. Is this that type of moment at the end of the quote unquote flood when Noah comes to this place of rest? So if he came to this place of rest and doing so, totally relaxed, totally caught up in the spiritual state that is reflective of being drunken in the spirit, and the son not respecting that, Ham not respecting that, and Ham mocking that and seeing it as a vulnerability to be mocked, and the others coming in to make to cover that vulnerability by virtue of being there, by removing Ham from that place, and them in a sort of way standing guard or becoming that covering for him during the period of his vulnerability. It's either that or it is the other one where it is the intercourse thing. And I don't see it as being the intercourse thing. Am I confusing you more or making more sense?
That makes sense, but don't we get drunk off of religious antics, the rules and stuff, regulations or whatever?
Don't want to go there yet. I want to get straight with
okay.
This. I want to stay right here with the spiritual drunkenness of Noah, which is a righteous thing that we have made to be unrighteous. I'm beginning to see that this thing that we have made to be unrighteous is no different than the righteousness that we attributed to Abel and now we see it wasn't that at all. So I'm beginning to see that this is a different state that this man is in. It is a state where he is standing in the midst of this church, and here he is. He is caught up in what has just taken place in his life. In his life, he has been shown the righteousness of our Creator, and he has been shown the nature and the essence of his being. And he's caught up in that. And then someone walks in and says, what in the world is he doing? What are you doing? And he he doesn't hear them, and they began to mock him. And then someone else comes in and say, leave him alone, and they become his covering because they stand between him and the one mocking him. So what happens? So now what happens is, because of the mocking, everything that comes from the thing that comes from the one who's doing the mocking is something that's going to be cursed. It's not going to have the same righteous spirit as would the two sons who became the covering for him. Am I making sense, or am I rambling?
You're making sense, Ray, because right now, everybody else don't roll the physical thing about it. You just telling the spiritual thing about it.
But I need to know if there's understanding about it at this moment.
To me, it is.
Anyone else?
Yeah, Pastor.
I'm understanding a bit.
I beg your pardon?
Ramel said she's understanding a bit.
Okay. Anyone else? Come on now.
Well, Reb, one thing that we do need to know about the vineyard, or any vineyard in that era, once the vineyard had been harvested, the vineyard was open for people who traveled for nourishment, and even the poor. Is that safe to say, Reverend Richard, or is it not safe to say?
But the vineyard was just like any other field of planting. Once they harvested, they didn't go back through it. Every traveler could have the rest of it. But this is totally different than what we're talking about right now. What we're talking about right now is the state of being. Hello? What we're talking about is the state of being of Noah at the end of his journey during the 40-day flood. What we're talking about is, what we're making every effort to see, rather, is what took place at this moment when Noah was in a state of vulnerability. What is it that Ham did that was disrespectful to the extent that the first seed of Ham would bear the burden of that disrespect? And what did Ham do that was so disrespectful until it took the two brothers to intervene and to bring dignity back to their father, Noah? What is it that they did to do that? Was it a physical covering? No, it was not. It was a spiritual covering. So when we look at we have to look at the ancient Hebrew to see what Ham did by virtue of Ham's name. The ancient Hebrew, by what happened in regards to Canaan, the first seed of Ham. Because if you look at it, they're not talking about the wombs that these boys came out of. I'm talking about the grandsons of Noah. They came out of. They're talking about the seed of the sons. And what are we seeing here in that regard? That's what I'm trying to get at. Does that make sense? I think that it's going to take more than a couple of times. We're probably going to have to sit down and search the ancient Hebrew for the meanings of these words, because what I found by looking at Benner and others from ancient Hebrew is that there are places and times when the Strong's Concordance does not deal with the depth of the meaning of those words. Why? Because a large portion of Strong's Concordance, if not most of it, is based upon the Septuagint, the Greek translations of the Old and New Testament, and therein lies an issue. Does that make sense? Hello.
Yeah, it does.
Yes.
one of the things in looking at nakedness in Genesis is 59:03 from verse 7. The eyes of them were both open and they saw that they were naked. That's 59:03, excuse me. And it is spelled EROM. And when you look at EROM, it's pronounced AYROME. But when you look at it, it talks about to be shrewd or crafty. To become shrewd or very.
Well, hold right there, Ron. Now, this is the question. This is what I found. If you look at the word naked in that place, is it the exact same word as naked in this place? Because
no.
Okay, therein lies the difference, and that is the reason it is imperative to look at it from the ancient Hebrew, in addition to trying to discern what Strong is saying. What Strong is saying, rather. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So to look at it, all of these words as being negative simply because they were translated that way doesn't mean that that's what they mean. Because how many times have we seen words translated as something only to find out that that's not what it really means? And one of them is blessed. Barak in every place that is not translated as blessed. So this is, I'm beginning to feel like this is the same case right here. And I do not know why we are being led to understand this, but I do know that it is extremely important that we do, but for what reason, I don't know. So let's take the time to go through this, not necessarily in discussion right now, but go through it through our research of these words, understand what these words mean, and then bring them together in discussion. Does that make sense?
I'm wondering, because the 18th verse talked about, it introduced Canaan right then and there. And we talked about the fact that Canaan also means to be brought into synchronicity. And so a curse can be used because things are in motion one way or the other, black or white, up or down. Same with curse. If people's hearts and minds change in terms of understanding their essence, that curse can become the means for them being used to bring others into synchronicity with the universe.
Now, interestingly enough, when you look at the root here in verse 23 of chapter 9 of Genesis here, the root of course, it means to be bare, to be naked, to be made naked. But when you look at the root of it, when you look, it says to leave destitute, to empty something, to pour out, or to spread, or to uncover, or to empty something. So I mean, this is it probably should never have been said. You left naked. I do this. I tell you what, though, I think if you guys would agree that it's kind of looked at this and maybe Bill, I'm more excited about it now than I was yesterday, I guess, because yesterday I just felt like I didn't have a clue, and today I still don't have much of a clue, but I at least have a clue as to what this is saying. now, so I'm a little more excited about it. Maybe a good place to pick up Saturday morning, and then give us a few more days to look at it. How's that sound?
It will give us a better opportunity to do some word searches on those in comparisons to see what it's actually saying, and to make sure that those words mean the same thing. That's all.
Enjoy it then, y'all. And that's what we'll do, everybody. Take a deeper look at this, and we'll convene again Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Sounds good?
Sounds good.
Sounds
Okay.
good. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
What's the connection?